Callum had always been a man of mechanics working in the junkyard of forgotten ships and broken technology scattered across the barren landscape of an uncharted asteroid field. It was a life that many had long abandoned, but he found solace in the clang of tools against rusted metal and the hum of engines. He wasn't just fixing ships, he was giving them a second chance. Each broken part he repaired, each engine he brought back to life, felt like a small victory in a galaxy that had left him behind. But as the days passed and the stars twinkled far above him, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more out there, something beyond the endless piles of scrap. One evening, as the twin moons of the asteroid system rose into the sky, Callum's boots crunched on the gravel. As he made his way to a new section of the junkyard, his eyes caught the faintest glimmer of something among the heaps of derelict ships, an outline too perfect, too clean to be another forgotten relic. He knelt down, wiping away layers of dust and dirt, to reveal a piece of metal that seemed to pulse with an energy of its own. It wasn't just a ship part, it was a whole ship buried beneath centuries of neglect and debris. Curiosity piqued Callum, cleared away more of the wreckage. The ship was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Its sleek design, unlike the bulky and utilitarian ships he normally encountered, the metal seemed to shimmer in the dim light like it was alive or reacting to his presence. But there was something else, a strange symbol etched into the hull of the vessel. It was a pattern that Callum had never seen before, but somehow it felt familiar, like it was calling to him. He spent the next few days scavenging parts from the surrounding wrecks and carefully repairing the ship, working long hours under the pale glow of his work lights. He had no idea what he was doing. All he knew was that he couldn't leave it alone. There was something about the ship that captivated him, and as the days turned into weeks, the repairs progressed from simple fixes to full-on reconstructions. At one point, he thought he saw the ship's surface pulse, as though it was reacting to his touch, but he wrote it off as fatigue. Finally, after weeks of work, the ship was ready. Callum climbed into the cockpit, his heart racing with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The control panel blinked to life. As he settled into the seat, a low hum filled the cockpit. The sound was almost soothing. He grasped the controls tentatively, but when he did, the ship responded instantly, as if it were waiting for him. All at once, the engines powered on with a deep, resonating roar that vibrated through his bones, and the entire junkyard seemed to shudder. But it wasn't just the ship that was reacting. Callum could feel it inside himself, too, an unexpected connection between him and the ship, something he couldn't explain, a bond forming in real time between the mechanic and the vessel, as if they were both waking up from a long slumber. For a moment, the stars outside the cockpit seemed to blur and shift before snapping back into focus, and Callum could have sworn the ship was alive and aware of him, its presence filling his thoughts with images and strange symbols he didn't understand. In that instant, he realized he hadn't just repaired a ship, he had uncovered something far greater, something ancient and powerful, a relic from a time long forgotten. But as the realization hit him, he felt a sudden unease. The ship was no ordinary machine. It was a key to something far more dangerous than he had ever anticipated, and it wasn't long before others would come looking for it. Callum had always been a quiet man, content with his own company and the endless hours spent tinkering with rusted engines. But the ship, this strange, otherworldly vessel, changed everything. The first time it powered on, it felt as though the very air around him had thickened, as if the ship was pulling him into its orbit, a gravitational pull unlike any he had ever experienced. He sat still in the cockpit, his hands trembling over the controls, trying to comprehend what was happening. The ship hummed around him, the sound vibrating through his bones, as if it was waking from a long slumber, and it was no longer a mere machine, but something far more alive, aware, and intelligent. At first, it was subtle, a flicker of light here, a slight change in the ship's systems there. But the more Callum worked on it, the more he felt the ship's presence. Quiet whispers in his mind, like a distant echo. He could swear the ship was speaking to him, though he couldn't understand the language or the meaning of the visions that would suddenly fill his mind. A sea of stars, ancient ruins, and a hand reaching out from the darkness. Every repair, every adjustment he made seemed to draw the ship closer to life, as if it were feeding off his very thoughts. He thought it was just the isolation getting to him, the lack of human contact for so long. But deep down, he knew something else was happening. The ship was responding to him in ways that defied logic. Then, the whispers grew louder. It was the fourth day after the ship powered on that Callum first realized the ship's systems were no longer merely responding to his mechanical work. They were adapting to him. The cockpit's displays, once cryptic and unfathomable, now began to show symbols he could almost recognize, fragments of words he could almost understand. As his fingers danced over the console, the ship pulsed with light, its energy systems sensing to his heartbeat. The strange feeling of being connected grew stronger, and Callum began to understand that this wasn't just a ship. It was something much more, an entity that had been dormant for centuries, waiting for the right person, the right touch. But with every passing day, the ship became harder to control. Its responses were growing erratic, its power surging in ways Callum couldn't anticipate. One evening, as he worked on the engine's core, an unexpected surge of energy shot through the system, jolting him back into the seat. The ship seemed to groan, its hull trembling as if it were alive, like it was testing him, pushing him to understand its true nature. In that moment, Callum felt something other, something watching from the far reaches of space. He wasn't alone, not anymore. There were eyes in the dark. His heart pounded in his chest as he quickly began scanning the ship's systems, but nothing appeared out of the ordinary. The ship's energy levels were off the charts, but its core was stable. He dismissed the feeling, attributing it to fatigue, until he noticed something even stranger, a signal pulsing from deep within the heart of the ship, directed outward toward the galaxy. It wasn't a beacon, it wasn't a distress signal, it was a call. But to who? It wasn't long before Callum received an answer. High above the asteroid, hidden from Callum's eyes, an ancient race of highly advanced engineers known as the Histari had been tracking the energy signature of the ship. They had sensed its activation from the very moment the ship's core hummed to life. For centuries, the Histari had searched the galaxy for the lost relics of the architects, a species whose technology was said to hold unimaginable power. They had no idea that the ship had fallen into the hands of a human mechanic, an unexpected turn of events that would change the balance of the galaxy forever. A fleet of Histari ships appeared in the sky, silently descending on the asteroid. Their sleek silver vessels glinted in the cold light of the twin moons as they began to scan for the source of the signal. They had come for the ship, and they wouldn't stop until it was theirs. They were not interested in a mechanic. They had no use for one, but the ship, it was everything they had been searching for. As Callum looked out the cockpit window, the first sign of their arrival appeared, a ripple in the stars, a distortion in the void of space. For a brief, fleeting moment, Callum thought he saw something moving through the fabric of reality itself, a glint of light, sharp and fast, like a blade cutting through the stars. The Histari were coming, and they weren't going to let anything stand in their way. But Callum had no idea how much he had already awakened within the ship. He only knew that his life and the fate of the galaxy were about to change in ways he could never have imagined. Callum sat frozen in the cockpit, his mind racing as the stars outside seemed to blur into something unfamiliar, something dangerous. He could feel the presence of the ship around him, like it was breathing with him, pulsing with energy that was not entirely his own. A part of him wanted to shut it down, to pull the plug and walk away from the whole mess, but another part, deeper, darker, knew he couldn't. The ship was alive now, and so was he. The connection between them was unbreakable. Then he saw them. The sleek Histari ships appeared in the dark sky, their silver hulls glinting in the cold light of the distant stars. There were dozens of them, silent, efficient, like a swarm of metallic locusts descending upon a lone prey. Callum's breath caught in his chest as he watched them slowly surround the junkyard, their sensors scanning for the source of the ship's energy signature. He could feel their presence too, like eyes in the dark, eyes that saw through the veil of space and time. Callum's hand instinctively hovered over the ship's controls, his fingers brushing the cool surface of the console. A faint hum vibrated through the ship as if it were awaiting his command. He didn't know how, but somehow he understood the ship's language now. It wasn't just a mechanical entity, it was a sentient being that could communicate with him. He could hear its thoughts, whispers in his mind, urging him to move, to leave. But he couldn't. The ship was a part of him now, and it wouldn't let him go that easily. The first shot came from above, a beam of concentrated energy that sliced through the sky, striking the junkyard with deadly precision. Callum barely had time to react as the blast sent debris flying, the shockwave shaking the entire junkyard. He was thrown against the cockpit's restraints, the world spinning around him. He could hear the ship groan, its metal frame creaking under the stress. The energy shield activated instantly, a shimmering force field that absorbed the blast and deflected the next one, but Callum knew the shield wouldn't hold for long. The Hestari ships were methodical, their strikes coordinated, precise. They didn't waste time. Each blast was calculated to disable, not destroy. Callum realized they weren't trying to kill him, they were trying to capture him. They knew exactly what he had, and they weren't going to let him escape. But what they didn't know was that the ship wasn't just an artifact, it was a weapon, and it was more than capable of defending itself. With a violent jolt, Callum slammed his hands down on the controls, feeling the ship respond instantly. The engine roared to life, and the ship surged forward, lifting off the ground with a speed that defied its size. The Hestari ships scattered, surprised by the sudden movement, but Callum didn't give them time to recover. His fingers moved quickly over the console, activating the ship's weapons systems. A brilliant burst of light erupted from the ship's belly, sending a pulse of energy that tore through the air, sending the nearest Hestari ship veering off course. The battle had begun. Callum's heart pounded in his chest as the ship danced through the asteroid field, narrowly avoiding incoming blasts from the Hestari. The ship was faster, more agile than anything Callum had ever flown, responding to his every thought, every movement. It felt like he was part of the ship itself, the two of them moving in perfect harmony as if they had been forged together long ago. But the Hestari were relentless, their ships closing in from all sides. The air around Callum crackled with tension, the ship's systems struggling to keep up with the escalating attack. As Callum twisted and turned through the debris field, he noticed something strange. Another fleet of ships, this time with a more menacing, brutal design, was appearing on the edges of the field. Their colors were dark, their energy signatures aggressive. They weren't Hestari, they were something else. Callum felt a chill run down his spine as the ships began to fire, joining the assault against the Hestari. These were the Valkyrie. Ruthless and merciless, the Valkyrie were known for their brutal conquests across the galaxy, sweeping through civilizations and leaving destruction in their wake. They had been drawn to the battle by the same signal that had brought the Hestari, and now they saw an opportunity. To them, it didn't matter who controlled the ship. What mattered was that it fell into their hands. Callum's heart sank as the two factions clashed in the sky above him, the universe's most powerful forces vying for control of the ship. He was caught in the middle of a war he never wanted, but there was no turning back now. The ship was his responsibility, and if he didn't act quickly, it wouldn't just be his life on the line. The fate of the galaxy itself was at stake. The ship responded to him again, its energy surging through him as if to remind him that he wasn't alone in this fight. Together, they were going to make it out of this. Together, they were going to change everything. The chaos of the battle continued to rage above the junkyard as the Hestari and Valkyrie clashed in a deadly dance. Callum, his hands gripped tightly on the controls, maneuvered the ship through the debris-filled sky, narrowly dodging blasts from both sides. The ship's weapons responded to his every thought, the energy blasts bursting from its hull in rapid succession, striking down enemy ships with unrelenting precision. For a brief moment, it felt like the ship was guiding him, its advanced systems anticipating his moves before he even made them. He was no longer just a mechanic. He was the ship's partner, its equal, and it was giving him power, unimaginable power. But that power came with a cost. The energy reserves were draining faster than he could keep up with, and the ship's systems began to show signs of strain. Warning lights flashed across the console, and a soft, eerie hum filled the cockpit. The ship wasn't just a weapon, it was a living thing, and it was starting to burn out, pushing itself beyond its limits. Callum's heart raced as he scanned the readings. If he didn't act soon, the ship would collapse under the strain, and he would be left at the mercy of the two warring factions. Just as Callum was about to make a desperate maneuver, the ship's AI, an eerie, almost sentient presence, spoke to him in a voice that was both soothing and commanding. "You are not alone in this." The words echoed in his mind, their meaning both cryptic and clear. For the first time, Callum felt the weight of his connection to the ship. He wasn't merely piloting it. He was becoming one with it, drawing on its ancient power. The ship's energy surged again, this time without draining the reserves. It was as if the very fabric of space itself bent around them, the stars seeming to stretch and twist as the ship accelerated beyond anything Callum had ever experienced. The HFY fleet, now severely damaged from the relentless onslaught, broke formation and began to retreat. But the Valkyrie were undeterred. They pushed forward, determined to claim the ship for themselves. Callum could feel their aggression, their desire to destroy. But he also felt something else, a dark, primal hunger for control that the ship itself was beginning to reflect. It was testing him, pushing him to confront the power it held within. Then the unthinkable happened. With a sudden violent jolt, the ship plunged into a hyperspace jump, a leap that Callum hadn't initiated, one that seemed to come from deep within the heart of the vessel itself. The stars outside the cockpit blurred into streaks of light, and the ship shot through the galaxy like a comet. Callum's breath caught in his throat as the ship's speed reached impossible levels, its power pulsing around him like a storm. But it wasn't just the speed that overwhelmed him. It was the sensation of space itself warping, bending around him. The ship wasn't just traveling through space, it was distorting it. Callum could feel the fabric of reality shift, the laws of physics bending and twisting as if they were made of mere suggestion. The ship was far beyond anything he had ever imagined, and it was no longer just a vessel, it was a force. The Valkyrie fleet, unable to follow, fell behind as the ship cut through the galaxy like a blade. But as they watched the anomaly disappear into the void, they knew that this was no ordinary ship. And it wasn't just Callum who had unlocked its secrets. It was the ship itself, revealing its true nature to him, and through him, to the galaxy. Callum's control over the ship had awakened something within it, something ancient, something far more dangerous than either the Valkyrie or the HFY had anticipated. Suddenly, the ship lurched forward again, and Callum found himself plummeting toward a planet, its atmosphere looming large on the screen. The ship was on a crash course, but as he struggled to regain control, the AI spoke again. "Do not fear. Trust in us." In a split second, the ship righted itself, gliding smoothly through the atmosphere as if it had always belonged there. Callum's heart pounded as he realized the ship had more control over its movements than he ever could have imagined. It wasn't simply responding to him anymore. It was guiding him, leading him to a destination he couldn't understand. As the ship landed gently on the surface of a desolate, rocky planet, Callum stared at the barren landscape outside the cockpit. This was no random place. He could feel it. The ship had brought him here for a reason that was still hidden in the depths of its ancient memory banks. He had unlocked its power, but now he needed to understand it, to learn its true purpose before the factions caught up with him. Before the galaxy tore itself apart, the ship had given him a glimpse of its potential, but the true power, its true purpose, was still waiting to be uncovered. And Callum knew that whatever it was, it would change everything. Callum stared out of the cockpit window at the barren planet below him. The landscape stretched endlessly, rocky, jagged mountains, vast plains of cracked earth, and deep canyons. There was nothing here, at least nothing that seemed to suggest any form of civilization. The ship had landed smoothly, guided by its own intelligence, but something in Callum's gut told him this was no accident. The ship had brought him here for a reason. He could still feel its presence, pulsing through him, urging him forward. It wasn't just a ship. It was a relic of something ancient, something vast. He knew this now with absolute certainty. But why had it chosen him? What was its purpose? Callum didn't know, but he wasn't about to sit idly by and wait for the answers to come to him. He stood up from the cockpit and made his way to the ship's hatch. The air outside was thin, but it was breathable, something that surprised him considering the desolate nature of the planet. As he stepped out, he noticed that the ground was surprisingly solid beneath his boots, yet eerily quiet, as though the planet had not seen life for millennia. A slight breeze brushed against his face, carrying with it a scent he couldn't quite place, a mix of metal, ozone, and something faintly organic, like an ancient memory. The ship, now powered down but still humming faintly with energy, stood behind him like a silent sentinel. Callum took a deep breath and began walking. There was a pull within him, a call that he couldn't ignore, guiding him toward a distant ridge on the horizon. The ship had sent him here, but now it was time to find out why. After several hours of walking, Callum arrived at the edge of a vast canyon. The jagged cliffs dropped sharply into the darkness below, but at the far end of the canyon, something caught his eye. In the distance, the faint outline of structures loomed, half buried under centuries of dust and debris. His heart skipped a beat. This was no natural formation. It was a city, or what remained of it, a forgotten city buried deep within the planet's surface. Callum's pulse quickened as he made his way down the canyon's narrow path, the distant city drawing him in like a magnet. He knew, instinctively, that this was the ship's destination. The closer he got, the clearer the outlines of the city became. Towering spires of blackened stone, covered in strange symbols, stood like silent guardians over the ruins. What had once been a thriving metropolis was now a crumbling testament to a lost civilization. Reaching the base of the city, Callum's eyes widened. The architecture was unlike anything he had ever seen, curved, flowing structures that seemed to defy the laws of physics. It was as if the city had been built by hands that understood the very nature of space and time itself. The stone walls shimmered faintly, as though they were alive, breathing with an energy that Callum couldn't explain. He stepped forward, drawn by the same pull he had felt since the ship landed. As he approached the entrance of one of the largest structures, a towering archway covered in intricate designs, the ship's energy pulsed within him, guiding him toward it. He reached out and touched the arch, his fingers brushing the stone. The moment he did, a surge of energy rushed through him, almost knocking him off his feet. Images flashed before his eyes, visions of beings with long, flowing limbs, their bodies made of light and energy, constructing the city with tools that seemed to bend reality. He saw glimpses of an ancient war, one that had torn the civilization apart, a war that had left the city in ruins. Then, just as suddenly as the visions had come, they stopped. The archway before him shifted, glowing with an eerie light. The door to the city, hidden for centuries, was opening. With his heart pounding in his chest, Callum stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, but there was a strange feeling in the atmosphere, like something had been waiting for him. The hallway stretched before him, its walls covered in the same symbols he had seen on the ship. They seemed to be alive, moving and shifting, as though they were trying to tell him something. The ship had led him here, and now it was time to uncover its secrets. As he walked deeper into the city, the energy around him grew stronger. The air crackled with static, and Callum could feel his connection to the ship intensifying. He reached the center of the city, a massive open plaza where the ruins of a great temple stood. In its center was a pedestal, ancient and worn, but it still radiated power. Callum approached cautiously, his every step echoing in the silence. There on the pedestal lay an artifact, a sphere, smooth and black, about the size of a human head. It hummed with energy, the same energy that had guided Callum here. This was what the ship had led him to. It was the source of its power. As he reached out to touch it, the ground beneath him trembled, and the walls of the city began to glow with an intensity that made Callum's heart race. The ship, somewhere far above him, pulsed in response. Something was awakening, a force long dormant, and it was about to reveal its true power. Callum's hand hovered above the black sphere on the pedestal, the hum of its energy vibrating through his fingertips. He could feel the immense power it contained, a raw force that seemed to pulse with the same rhythm as the ship itself. It was as if the sphere was calling to him, drawing him closer, pulling him into a web of ancient secrets he couldn't yet understand. Every instinct told him to be cautious, but the ship had led him here for a reason, and he couldn't turn back now. As his fingers made contact with the smooth surface of the sphere, a wave of energy surged through him. The ground beneath his feet trembled, and the entire city seemed to come alive, the walls glowing brighter with each passing second. Callum's heart raced as the hum in the air grew louder, until it was a deafening roar, vibrating through every fiber of his being. He was no longer just touching the sphere, he was connected to it. Images flooded his mind in a dizzying rush, alien landscapes, ancient beings, and machines beyond comprehension. The city around him shifted, revealing its true form, not as a ruin, but as a vast, pulsating hub of energy. The power that had been dormant for eons was awakening, and it was choosing him to be its conduit. But even as he tried to process the flood of visions, he felt a sharp pain in his head, like the weight of the knowledge was too much to bear. His vision blurred, and he staggered back, breaking contact with the sphere. The hum slowly subsided, but the energy in the air still crackled around him, like static before a storm. "Are you all right?" The voice in his mind was the same one that had guided him before, the voice of the ship's AI, calm but urgent. Callum could feel the ship's presence as though it was right beside him, watching, waiting. "I'm fine," Callum said, trying to steady his breath. He shook his head to clear the disorienting images. "What was that? What is this place?" "The city is ancient," the voice replied. "It is the heart of the architects. They built the ship, and they built this place as well. But the war, it destroyed them." Callum's mind raced. The architects, the mysterious creators of the ship. The knowledge he had just glimpsed was beyond anything he had ever imagined. He could feel that the ship was more than just a vehicle. It was a vessel of immense knowledge, capable of unlocking the deepest secrets of the universe. But the pain he had felt was a warning, a reminder that this power was not to be taken lightly. He turned his gaze back to the pedestal, where the sphere lay. It was still glowing faintly, almost beckoning him. His connection to it had been severed, but it wasn't over. The ship had shown him the truth, but there was more to discover. Something more than just the remnants of a long-lost civilization. "The sphere," the ship's AI said, as if reading his thoughts. "It contains the core memory of the architects. It is a key to the power they left behind." Callum swallowed hard. The sphere wasn't just a relic, it was a weapon, a key to something far more dangerous than he had realized. The ancient war, the destruction of the architects, it all led back to this, and now somehow he was in the center of it all. Without thinking, Callum reached for the sphere again. This time, his touch was more deliberate, more focused. The moment his fingers brushed its surface, the ground shook violently, and a series of loud cracks echoed through the air. The energy around him intensified, and the walls of the city pulsed with a rhythmic beat, as if they were alive. The sphere's surface rippled, and suddenly, a flood of images filled Callum's mind again. This time, clearer, sharper. He saw the architects, their forms elegant and ethereal, their bodies shimmering with light. They were working on something, building something enormous, something that could change the fabric of reality itself. Then the war began. He saw massive explosions, ships falling from the sky, cities crumbling to dust. The power they had created turned against them, and in the chaos, the sphere, the ship, it had been hidden away, waiting for the day when someone would come to awaken it. The ship had always been meant to be a tool of creation, not destruction. But the war had corrupted its purpose. The architects had never intended for their creations to fall into the wrong hands. But that was exactly what had happened. And now the remnants of their civilization were scattered across the galaxy, waiting for someone to either control or destroy them once and for all. Callum staggered back as the last of the images faded, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He felt sick to his stomach, the weight of the knowledge almost too much to bear. The war wasn't just a part of history, it was ongoing. The Hestari, the Valkyrie, All of them were drawn to the ship and the power it contained. They were fighting not just for control of the ship, but for control of the legacy of the architects. But Callum knew one thing for certain now. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was a part of something much bigger, something that could reshape the universe. The ship, the sphere, the war. It was all connected, and he was standing at the center of it. And as the rumbling of the city grew louder, Callum realized he wasn't the only one who knew that the war was far from over. The echo of the city's rumbling vibrations pulsed beneath Callum's feet as he slowly pulled his hand away from the sphere. His mind was reeling from the flood of images and knowledge, the weight of the architect's legacy heavy on his shoulders. The sphere in front of him was no mere relic. It was a gateway to unimaginable power, a weapon capable of altering the very fabric of reality. But it was also a key to the war that had destroyed the architects and now threatened to consume the galaxy once more. Callum, the ship's AI voice was now urgent. The forces are converging. The Valkyrie have located your position. They are already on their way. His heart skipped a beat. The Valkyrie. How had they found him so quickly? Had the ship's awakening somehow triggered a beacon? The questions piled up in his mind, but there was no time to dwell on them. The danger was real, and it was closing in fast. We need to leave now, the AI insisted. The Valkyrie are relentless, and they are not alone. The Hestari will follow. You must activate the ship. Callum didn't need to be told twice. He turned away from the pedestal and began to sprint toward the exit of the ancient temple. The city around him seemed to pulse with energy, its once lifeless stones now vibrating with the power that had been unlocked. As he ran, he could feel the pull of the ship, calling him, guiding him back to its location. The sky above the planet had darkened, thick clouds rolling across the horizon as if reflecting the growing storm below. A sense of dread settled in Callum's gut. The war that had consumed the architects was now about to spill into the galaxy again, and he was at the center of it all. When Callum reached the ship, he found it still dormant on the surface, its sleek, jagged hull casting an imposing silhouette against the dimming sky. He rushed to the hatch, barely pausing to input the override code. As soon as the door opened, he rushed inside, the hum of the ship's energy enveloping him, familiar and comforting, but also unsettling in its power. Initiating departure sequence, the AI announced, and the ship's systems sprang to life. The engines thrummed with power as the ship's shields activated, a faint blue glow surrounding the vessel. Callum took his seat at the control panel, his mind still reeling from the revelations in the temple. The sphere, the architects, the war. Everything was tied together in a way he couldn't yet understand, but he didn't have the luxury of time to figure it all out. He had to act. The ship's AI spoke again, its tone growing more insistent. They are here. Outside, the first of the Valkyrie ships appeared on the horizon, their dark silhouettes cutting through the sky like predatory birds. They were fast, precise, and relentless. But it wasn't just the Valkyrie that concerned Callum. He knew the Hestari were not far behind, and if they both arrived at the same time, it would be chaos. The power of the ship of the sphere was too dangerous to fall into the wrong hands. He slammed his hand down on the activation button, and the ship shot into the air with blinding speed. The sudden acceleration pushed Callum back into his seat as the ship tore through the atmosphere, leaving the planet behind in a blur. The Valkyrie were already in pursuit, but they were too slow to match the ship's newfound speed. The AI guided him with calculated precision, weaving through the debris of the battle that had once raged above the junkyard, heading toward the outer reaches of the system. Callum's hands flew over the controls as the ship's weapons system activated, targeting the approaching Valkyrie ships. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was now the pilot of a living weapon, a force that could decide the fate of the galaxy. And as the first volley of energy blasts shot from the ship, ripping through the hull of the closest Valkyrie ship, Callum realized just how far he had come. The Valkyrie responded with a barrage of their own, but the ship's shields absorbed the blows effortlessly, its power far beyond anything they could throw at it. Each blast Callan fired from the ship's weapon systems seemed to strike with perfect accuracy, each explosion a testament to the ship's ancient capabilities. "The Hestari are incoming," the AI warned, its voice calm, but with an edge of urgency. "You will need to decide, fight or escape. The sphere's power is enough to repel them, but it will drain the ship's core energy quickly." Callum hesitated for a moment. He knew the Valkyrie and Hestari were both hunting him, and while he could fight, the truth was that he couldn't hold out forever. But if he fled now, what would happen to the galaxy? Could he run from the consequences of the power he had awakened? In that moment, Callum knew what he had to do. He couldn't just escape. He had to end this. He had to bring the fight to them. "Engage the full power of the sphere," Callum ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Let's make this count." A deep hum filled the ship, the energy from the sphere surging through the vessel like a storm. The ship's weapons powered up, brighter than ever, and Callum steered the ship directly toward the incoming Hestari fleet, the decision now made. The galaxy would soon know that a mechanic from a forgotten junkyard had changed the rules of the game forever. The ship's energy hummed like a beast awakening from a long slumber, its weapon systems fully powered by the sphere's ancient power. Callum gripped the controls tightly as the Hestari fleet grew larger in his view, their ships sleek and menacing, closing in fast. They had the advantage in numbers, but they were no match for the power that surged through the ship now. The Valkyrie were still in pursuit, but Callum didn't have the time to worry about them. His target was clear, the Hestari. "They're within range," the ship's AI voice echoed, calm and precise. "Activating defensive protocols. You may engage." Callum didn't hesitate. His fingers danced across the controls, and the ship's energy cannons erupted with a devastating volley, each blast hitting its mark with pinpoint accuracy. The lead Hestari ship exploded into a blinding flash of light, debris scattering in all directions as the ship disintegrated. The remaining ships faltered, but only for a moment. They were relentless, their shields absorbing the initial barrage, and they quickly retaliated, firing concentrated energy blasts at the ship. The ship's shields flared brightly, absorbing the hits with ease. Callum felt the ship's hum grow stronger in response, its power rising with each strike. The ancient technology of the architects was more than just a tool. It was a living, breathing entity, and it seemed to respond to Callum's will as if it were part of him. "The Valkyrie are converging on our position," the AI warned again, its tone sharper now. "You must decide, do you push forward or do you evade the incoming fire?" Callum gritted his teeth. Evading wasn't an option. He had the power now and he was going to use it. He had to end this conflict, once and for all. "Push forward," Callum ordered firmly. His voice was steady, but inside, a fire burned. This was it, the final stand. "Give me everything you've got." The ship surged forward, blasting through the Hestari ranks with a burst of speed that left the enemy ships scrambling to react. Callum's eyes narrowed as he locked onto the largest Hestari vessel, a massive dreadnought bristling with weapons. It was their flagship, the heart of their fleet. "Target locked," the AI announced. "Engage at maximum power." Without warning, the ship fired everything it had, a torrent of energy that ripped through the dreadnought's shields. The ship's weapons glowed brighter than ever, the power of the sphere coursing through them, and the flagship faltered, its shields failing as the first wave of blasts tore through its hull. The second volley was even more devastating, and with an explosion that shook the very fabric of space, the flagship disintegrated into a cloud of fire and debris. Callum's breath caught in his throat as the Hestari fleet reeled from the loss. The remaining ships scattered in a desperate attempt to regroup, but Callum wasn't finished. He wasn't going to give them the chance to retreat. The ship's energy was still surging through him, filling him with a sense of invincibility. "They are retreating," the AI reported, though there was no relief in its voice. "But the Valkyrie are closing in." Callum's heart raced as the Valkyrie ships came into view, their dark forms slicing through the void with terrifying precision. He knew they weren't going to give up so easily. But this time, it was different. He had seen their tactics, and he had learned from them. He knew their weaknesses. Initiate evasive maneuvers, Callum ordered, his voice calm despite the chaos. Prepare for a counterattack. The ship danced through space, twisting and turning with uncanny agility. The Valkyrie fired their energy blasts, but they missed, each shot just barely grazing the ship's shields. Callum's hands flew over the controls, guiding the ship with an almost instinctual grace, weaving between the Valkyrie ships as they attempted to lock on. Then, with a sudden jolt, the ship turned sharply, its energy weapons unleashing a devastating barrage at close range. The first Valkyrie ship crumpled under the force, its hull cracking open as the ship's weapons tore through it. The second ship followed suit, and within moments, the remaining Valkyrie fleet was in disarray. But just as Callum thought the battle was over, a flash of light filled the skies. A new ship, even larger than the rest, appeared on the horizon. Its sleek, menacing silhouette cut through the darkness of space like a predator closing in on its prey. "A new fleet has arrived," the AI warned. "The Valkyrie have brought reinforcements." The new ship was unlike anything Callum had ever seen. Its hull shimmered with an energy that matched the power of the sphere, and its weapons glowed with the intensity of a dying star. This was the Valkyrie's ultimate weapon, and it was heading straight for him. Callum's fingers hovered over the controls, a sense of determination settling over him. He had come too far to turn back now. The galaxy had already felt the shockwaves of the war, but it wasn't over yet. He still had a chance to end it. With a deep breath, he pushed the ship to its limits, locking onto the new threat. The ship's energy surged again, a final push of power that sent a brilliant wave of light cutting through the darkness of space. The ultimate weapon of the Valkyrie exploded in a shower of sparks and fire, the energy overwhelming its defenses. The ship's hull began to crack and break apart, and with one final deafening explosion, it disintegrated into nothing. Silence fell. Callum leaned back in his seat, his heart pounding in his chest. The battle was won. The war, at least for now, was over. But as he gazed out into the vast emptiness of space, he knew the conflict was far from finished. The galaxy was changing, and he had just ignited a fire that would burn for centuries to come. He had become more than a mechanic. He had become a force of nature, and the universe would never be the same again.